Hey everybody, welcome to the Making of an Exception podcast. Today we've got Nathan O'Malley from Minnesota Leatherworks.
Good morning.
Thanks so much for being here, man.
Thank you for having me.
Nathan is the lead sewer at Minnesota Leatherworks, which is amazing. I didn't even know that that was a legit job title.
We're working on it.
We're working on it, yeah. That's awesome. How long have you been sewing?
I've been sewing for about 10 years, actually. I started with tailoring a little bit, my own clothes, and full-time at Leatherworks, Minnesota for 7 years almost. 7
years sewing at Minnesota Leatherworks.
Yep.
So tell us a little bit about that company. I know it's part of your family, and for the last 7 years. But what's some of the stuff that you're making? And I know it's all around the country now.
Yeah. Well, we started in 1999. I didn't start it. My parents started it. I was 11 years old, but they got married in 1999. My stepdad, Kent, and my mom, Lee.
Yep.
And he'd been working full-time for a leather company called Duratech for probably 20 years, and multi-million-dollar leather company gets bought out and shipped to China.
Yeah.
So the year my parents get married, my dad's out of a job.
No way.
And so they start Leatherworks in the basement. It was formerly called Amen Acres Leather.
Yeah.
And for 12 years, the company honestly scraped by.
Yeah.
Just kind of went backwards and did okay, but it was enough to support us. But it was.
This is why you were growing up.
Yeah. So while I'm growing up, and it was cool because, both my parents were always home and in the house, and had a lot of good accountability there. And so
the company was literally, they're making leather goods out of your house.
Out of the garage.
Out of the garage.
Yep, started in the basement, went to the garage.
That's where the best companies start. Yep. You know what? We should start recording this podcast out of a garage.
We could put a lot of towels on the wall too.
Yeah, we should.
So we started in the garage. In about 2012, we got invited to Northern Grade, which was an event around town that's been once or twice a year ever since then.
Yep.
And that for us was when things kind of really started turning. We got sandwiched in between Filson and Red Wing boots. And I'd always had this idea, like, I want our company to be as recognizable as Red Wing boots.
Yes.
And like Leatherworks, Minnesota, you got your denim, you got your boots, you need a wallet to go with it.
Yes.
And ever since then, we'd had bloggers and magazines, and that same year, Martha Stewart magazine called and wanted to feature us in a gift guide. And so we went from kind of going backwards for years and almost losing everything to our business starts booming with the Made in America movement, which kind of was just really getting its bearings back then, 2011, 2012.
Yep.
And I would honestly argue it started in Minnesota, that whole movement.
Really?
And we've been busy ever since. And I started full-time at the end of my time at North Central.
How old were you then?
23 or 24.
And did you start as a sewer? That's been your job.
So my
for
dad
7
put
years.
me on just small product back then, just sewing and easy stuff, toothpick holders and key fobs, and not letting me touch the big stuff yet.
Yeah.
So it took me about a year to get proficient to where I could handle sewing on my own without instruction, and you kind of feel like the sewing machine's a part of you, and it just gets fluid. But we hired on another guy named Lucas, and my dad just goes, I think we need to move out of the garage. We're walking all over each other here.
Yeah.
And so kind of a leap of faith, we find a space in Lowertown, St. Paul, in the Northern Warehouse building, and checked it out, got a great discount on rent.
Nice.
Which was amazing and unheard of. And Kent asked the owner, this is our first time ever renting a space. Can we have the first 2 months free?
Yeah.
They said, yeah, no problem.
No.
And so we started off on a really good foot, and we've been busy ever since. Yeah. And we make wallets and belts and suspenders and key fobs. And
you said you have like 35 items that you're always
35
making,
items, about 6 colors of everything. So if you go on our website and scroll, it's like hundreds of product on there because it's it's all laid out, color categorized and everything. And so we went from back then maybe having 2 stores. Black Blue being one of the first stores we were ever in. Now we're in almost 70 stores globally, and mostly in the United States. A lot of stuff in Minneapolis. Yeah, and it's been so much fun. I didn't know it'd turn into a career for me. Yeah, and now I can honestly see myself being there for the rest of my life.
Yeah, well, the podcast is not just to talk about your trade and craft. It's mostly to talk about who you are as a person, but I've never met anybody that works with leather. So I'm going to ask a couple questions. So where do you get the leather from? Do you raise your own cows? And
no, I wish that'd be fun. We buy most of our hides from the Red Wing Boot Tannery called SB Foot. So same leather that goes on Red Wing boots.
Really?
Wicket and Craig and Herman Oak. There's a couple other tanneries around the country that we like.
Sure.
We have 6 stock colors for everything. So we kind of...
So they come already colored?
Yep. So we have 6 colors we like, and we just buy those hides in bulk from our suppliers.
No way.
Yeah.
And you're cutting them in, you do those colors in pretty much all your products?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Wow. It's awesome. That's the extent of all my questions about leather.
Yeah.
No,
it's fun. Who knew it could be so fun?
Yeah. How did your it's your stepdad, your mom, them starting that company? It's because the former company got shipped to China.
Yeah.
And how did he get into the leather world? Yeah.
So Kent was working leather back in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
Actually, just a couple blocks away from here is where Leatherworks really started. And his boss back then, the company kind of became this Duratec company, and he had stepped away for a number of years to pastor a church in Wisconsin, in Cumberland. So he was pastoring for a while and stepped away from that in the 90s, came back. He met my mom. We were going to Good Shepherd Church at the time in St. Paul, up on West 7th on the hill. And they got married in 1999, and he had a background already. And, I suppose you're starting a family and looking for a way to provide. And that's what he knew and was very good at it. Yeah. So that's what he did.
Yeah, that's awesome. So growing up, did you think, man, this is what I want to do? I'm going to step in the leather world.
No.
You already said you went to North Central.
Yep.
They don't have a leather or sewing degree at North Central. What were you doing? Yeah. Growing up, what were you passionate about? What were you kind of looking forward to?
I was always passionate about music. I started playing piano at a very young age and took piano lessons for years and picked up a guitar in 9th grade and never turned back. Went from the soccer field to the guitar.
Yes.
And music is what I've always wanted to do. It's what I've always been very good at.
Yep.
But I always knew that it wasn't my calling necessarily.
Yep.
So when I went to North Central, I was originally going to go to McNally Smith, where the new River Valley just opened.
Yeah.
I got talked out of it by my advisor in high school.
Really?
And so I went to North Central. I heard about North Central on a trip to Africa that I went on.
Yeah.
I got invited on a trip to climb Mount Kilimanjaro and raise funds with Venture. I don't know if you're familiar with them.
Was Paul Herkman on the trip?
He wasn't on the trip. It was Josh Iniguez and some of those folks.
Yep.
So they tell me about North Central and how great of a school it is and their music program and how great that is. Mm-hmm. So I went there with the idea that I'm going to do music. And when I went there, I've kind of felt my heart change more towards missions.
Yeah.
And I still took piano lessons when I was there with Miroslava Kasilovic and drum lessons. And I enjoyed that. But ultimately, God kind of pulled me towards the ICS department.
Yep. Intercultural studies.
Intercultural studies with an Islamic studies focus, yeah.
So your major was Islamic studies?
Yes.
And you were saying before we started recording, you were the first student to take that at North Central.
Yeah.
First student to graduate
First ever. Yeah, I think they even gave me a scholarship for it.
So how did your heart shift from music to missions? That's not a normal transition. Like as a boy, did you have a missions pull? Did you have like an adventure pull? Like, how do you make that leap to, nope, I'm going to give up music and I'm going to go across the world? And you haven't done that, which is crazy. So we'll get there. But
so I kind of grew up having a global perspective in a way. I was born overseas.
Yeah.
I was born in the Philippines.
Yeah.
In Angeles.
So how did that happen?
My biological father, he's in the Air Force, just retired after 30 years. So I was born on an air base over there. And growing up here, I always knew I was from somewhere else. And I remember when I was a kid, I felt like I want to be a missionary to the Philippines someday.
Yeah.
And I think I was 9 years old and go back home. And so I'd always had that idea in my mind that God wanted to use me for missions in some way and to tell people about him in other countries. And I would chase that down at North Central, and Philippines was always my focus.
Yep.
And there's a big Islamic community there. And then I got invited. Well, actually, when I was doing my fieldwork prep at North Central, it was either between Uganda, which I had just been, and that's how I heard about North Central, the Philippines, I was born there, or Turkey. Yeah. So I chose Turkey. I want to go somewhere I've never been.
Where did Turkey come from?
That was just on the list of the 3 places I could choose to go.
Yeah.
So I just went to Istanbul with Bob Brenneman and fell in love with it. And around the time I was reading Arabian Nights and getting really wrapped up in just this whole like Islamic worldview of just the way culture is and music. And and just being there, I just completely fell in love with the culture of Turkey. And then when I went back for my internship in 2011 and lived there for 3 months, kind of just fell deeper in love with the entire country and got to see so much of it. And, going on a 3,000-mile tour around the country and just seeing so much of it. So I came back and changed my major to Islamic studies and still had another year to go. And when I graduated, I got invited to go on a mission trip to the Philippines to teach what I had learned at North Central about intercultural relations between Christians and Muslims to pastors up in Baguio.
No way.
To kind of teach how to bridge those gaps between.
So you did that and you were there for how long?
2 weeks.
2 weeks?
Yep.
So now you had been to Uganda, Philippines, back to the Philippines and Turkey.
Yeah.
And coming home from that, are you feeling like, okay, I'm moving to one of these spots, or was one kind of leading the way?
Yep. I'd always thought Turkey, and it's something I'm still like praying about because life has transitioned so much in the last year. Where do you want me to go? Yeah. And the doors seem open to so many different places because I have a cultural connection to the Philippines, and being there and teaching, and they're like, this white kid was born here and he wants to come back and tell us about Jesus. That's awesome. Yeah. And there's like a Catholic heritage in the Philippines where there's a curiosity about who God is, and a lot of doors there. I'm open, honestly, to wherever that leads. Wherever. In the future, but Istanbul's, I'd say, the biggest place on my heart.
Oh, yeah, man. I've been to Istanbul twice. Yeah. And as we're filming this right now, or recording this right now, I'm going in a few days. When this is airing, while people listen to this, I will have just been. And Istanbul might be my favorite place on the planet.
I agree.
There's nothing like it.
Nothing beats the cityscape of riding the ferry back from Karakoy to Karakoy, and just especially at sunset and all the pillars and the Hagia Sophia and the Blue Mosque, and it's just such a beautiful,
epic spot,
striking, and the history, cultural heritage there that was the center of the Christian world for 1,000 years was Constantinople. Yep. The Hagia Sophia was essentially like the seat of the church until it was overthrown. And so there's, cities buried on cities there. And what the Turks do so well is preserve the Christian culture and the heritage there. Yeah. They don't completely wipe it out. So
yeah. Well, even I don't know if I ever say it right. Hagia Sophia. Hagia Sophia.
Yep. Saint Wisdom.
Yeah. Is that what it means? Yeah. Well, even there, you go there and it was a church, originally built as a church, converted into a mosque, and now it's a museum. And you go there, and when it was a mosque, they had covered up all the Christian artwork.
The icons.
Yeah, and now they've uncovered that so that you can go in the museum and tour and see these amazing murals of Jesus.
Yep, and they're still uncovering more. Yeah, there's... the big one that shows Jesus kind of depicted on the wall, and you see where they're peeling back the concrete. Yeah. Because, the Muslims that had taken over had plastered over it because just iconography is not allowed in Islam. Yeah. And they think there's even more under the dome on the ceiling that they can't really get to that was painted over. Yeah. And I just watched a documentary about that. It's fascinating. They think there's a huge mural of Christ on the top of the dome where they painted kind of the call to prayer on it. But
yeah, it's one of the most amazing museums and spots in the world. And Istanbul, a city that split by is it the Bering Strait?
The Bosphorus Strait.
Bosphorus Strait. Yep. And on the west side, it's Europe. On the east side, it's technically Asia. So it's one city on two continents. It's amazing. If you're listening, go to Istanbul.
Get your tickets today.
Get your tickets today. Go to Istanbul.
Give up coffee for a year and go do it.
Okay, so obviously you're not a missionary right now. You're not overseas. You're working in leather. And so what was the journey of, studying at North Central to go do that? And then you're still here and you're doing amazing things here, which is awesome. But obviously God still has some things on your heart for your future to do something around the world maybe.
Well, there was a big journey, I think, to God getting out a lot of the junk that I had been kind of dealing with in my private life for years. And a lot of that was alcoholism, addiction, smoking, and, the last couple years had been processing, why do I drink? Yeah. Why was I drinking so much? Yeah. And a lot of that, I'm sorry.
I'm just interrupting, but where did it start? You started drinking when?
I started drinking when I was at North Central. Yeah. Yeah. So I had kind of had this double life of wanting to pursue this calling and this passion. Yeah. And kind of medicating some sort of deep rooted pain that I wasn't sure what it was.
Yeah.
And that wasn't necessarily, I didn't really make bad friends at North Central. It was just this culture that I got into of kind of like partying off campus. And it really started to trigger later this very serious addiction. And something Tyssul and I were talking about the other day is, even though we're good and functioning healthy adults now, there's kind of that wound of like having a dad that's never there.
Yeah.
And what pain does that cause me as an adult now? And I think a lot of my drinking wasn't necessarily related to fatherlessness, but more to just identity and not knowing like who I was as a person. And I'd always had very affirming parents, my mom and my stepdad, and such great people to be around. But there's still always like a gap there that, you realize God can fill that.
Yeah.
But I wasn't fully surrendering that to God. I was drinking, and it wasn't so much an addiction in those earlier years. It kind of become an addiction over the last 2 years. Yeah. Maybe 3 years. I had been drinking casually and kind of 2016, 2017. And I realized I had a problem early last year. So I go to Berlin with my mom. 2017. Yeah. So February 2017, I hop a plane to Berlin, and I drink so much on the plane that I get gastritis. And I am
What's
sick.
That? I don't even know.
Inflammation of your stomach, and it's just gross and really painful.
So on the plane, you're just chugging.
The flight attendant just keeps bringing me wine after wine, and I realize like I can handle this and feel okay, and that probably means I have a problem if I can drink 6 glasses of wine and I'm fine, or drink 6. So my tolerance had gotten so high over the years that I didn't realize I had a problem. Yeah, I just figure I'm not drunk, so I don't feel it, but.
Is your mom sitting next to you? Like, what's the deal?
Yeah, she was the first one to encounter, like, I think you have a problem.
Yeah.
And I started to notice in Berlin, like, I'm just belligerent, I'm loud, I'm angry. I've been fighting with my mom a lot for years, and just all these issues that are like this deep anger that was all alcohol. Yeah. And so I had gone through kind of a serious, end of a relationship in end of 2015, and that's what really triggered the heavy addiction part. Yeah. And just numbing that pain, because, it's a painful experience. But I began to pray in early 2017, just like, God, like, take away this problem.
Yeah, you didn't want that problem.
I didn't want the problem, and I didn't realize how bad it was. And I was just like, take away this addiction, or give me the will to overcome it. And
I have a question. Just in this process, I think there's a lot of people that are dabbling in stuff that they probably know, like, man, shouldn't be doing this, shouldn't be here, shouldn't be hanging out with this person, or whatever it may be. Yep. But there's a real like switch that can flip of like, this is a problem. Like, it's not just I'm okay.
Yeah, I can handle this.
Control.
Yeah. Yep.
And there's something that there's a moment that happens that it's like, I have an actual problem, but I think there's a way before it happens to you that you as a person can self-identify. Yep. And I don't know, just in your process, was it your mom saying something? Was it just you hit the end of your rope situation? Or was there some like slowdown in your own spirit? Like, I need to do something about this.
It was all three. Because my mom started to call me out, and I'd get very angry and argue with her. And I just felt spiritually dead, being involved with my church, being on the missions committee. Yep. I felt like I'm just living in this double life that's a lie. Like, I believe these things about God, but I'm not living that same way. My life isn't painting that picture of what I claim. So I just started to pray, like, Lord, help me to overcome this addiction. Yeah. And he answered that prayer very quickly. Yeah. I started to wake up mid-March in the middle of the night just with my heart racing for hours at a time. I just wake up having tachycardia. And it scared me enough to like, maybe alcohol is causing this. I'm not sure, but I just felt imbalanced. Yeah. It started to continue through April to become more chronic. And May 12th, I still remember May 12th of last year, I had an episode where my heart just raced for hours at a time. Really? And I would lay down in bed and just shake, and my heart was racing. And I'm like, okay, I'm done. I'm done drinking. And that was the day I gave up alcohol and the day I gave up smoking. But in
my cold turkey dropped.
Yeah. So in my mind, I'm like, I'm just going to quit and I'll get better within a couple of weeks. My heart will be fine. And that was not the story at all.
Yeah. So what happened?
So I had quit drinking. I had quit smoking, but my heart would keep racing just regularly, really fast. And I'd go to the emergency room and they're like, well, everything's normal. It's just really fast and we can work on finding the root of that. And my primary doctors were testing me for autoimmune diseases and everything under the sun. So I have kind of what they call the $1 million workup.
Yeah.
And because when you have every test you can have and they can't figure out what's going on. So from May to July, I lost almost 30 pounds.
No.
And I'm not a big guy to begin with. So I go from 140 to 145 to 117. And I'm skeletal and I start to have neuropathy. So from head to toe, I'm just having this fiery burning nerve pain and shaking all the time and heart racing all the time.
And they can't figure out what's wrong.
Figure out what's going on.
So in this moment, what's your conversation like with the Lord? And you gave this up, and now you're dying.
My conversation, it was a lot of building trust with the Lord. It was, I don't know the answer to this situation, but you do, and I might die from this, and I trust you. Yeah. And that was essentially it. Mid-July, I woke up with this sensation and kind of this word like, go to the doctor again today. Yeah. So I call the U of M. I get put in with this new lady that I'd never even heard of before. And I'd grown up around the U of M. My mom used to work there. Dr. Santilli. And I go in and see her and she goes, well, we've tested you for just about everything. But she goes, have we ever checked you for a disease called thiamine deficiency? And it's also called beriberi. It's a very rare alcoholic disease. And she goes, you look like you have it. She goes, you're skeletal, you're red, you're nerve pain, everything, it sounds like it. So she looked up all the symptoms. Yeah. And she goes, we'll do a blood test today, but we're going to treat it as if that's what you have. So basically they just put me on crazy dosages of vitamin B1. And that was on a Monday. By Wednesday, I couldn't walk anymore. So I woke up and just my legs were dead. And
I couldn't move them, or I
could move them, but I couldn't hold my weight of my body. So I'd hobble and then I started to just feel delusional. And then I had insomnia for days at a time. And this is where I really think I'm about to die. Like, I have given up. I've been obedient. I did what you asked me to do. And where are you? And it wasn't so much anger as just like deep sorrow. Like
you did this to yourself.
Life is ending and I did this to myself.
Yeah.
And Friday, I get the phone call. We got your blood test back. You're completely deficient in B1 and folic acid, which is what causes anemia in your body. So I don't know what anemia is. Anemia is when you can't get oxygen into your red blood cells.
Got it.
Which explains the breathlessness and the heart racing and everything. So essentially, I should back up a little bit. I didn't believe her when I got the phone call because she said, you're going to feel crazy for a month, but you're going to get better. Yeah. And I didn't believe her because I was still like having 4 nights in a row where I just couldn't sleep. I couldn't walk. And I remember it was about 3 or 4 days in of just popping like 6,000% a day of these vitamins they put me on. Yeah. I started to be able to walk again and have like sensation. And I was still really weak for a while. But as time went on, I went from knowing I'm going to die to not dying. And I just kept living. Yep. And I just kept getting better and better. And it wasn't a quick process. It wasn't like God just healed me. And I genuinely believe it was a miracle bringing this lady in who knew exactly what was going on, how to diagnose it. And I think I think she had mentioned it was her field of study as well. Like she knew everything about this and that God sent me to her. And it was, just going from hopelessness and going through that withering away and where you start to feel life just going away and pulling away and separating. And I just remember in those moments that God was just right there. Yeah. Right next to me. And just everything was okay. Yeah. And even when I should have been terrified, that it was just like, fine.
Yeah, you're going to make it.
And, 2 months later, 3 months later, I'm still like weak and struggling. And we had just gotten a new dog at the time, Buddy. And Buddy would kind of pull me forward a little bit. So he was kind of helping me walk a little bit, which is kind of funny.
What kind of dog?
He's a toy poodle with a lot of energy. Yes. So August, September, I joined the gym. Yep. Because I was like, I'm starting to feel better. Like I'm going to be okay. Yep. And I'd say September of last year was when I accepted I'm going to survive. Yeah. And I joined a gym. I started doing a lot of cardio and lifting, and I'm still going to the gym. You can't tell, but it's been so much fun. Just going through just a life and death scenario, which I never thought I'd be in. Yeah. And God has used that to change so much of who I am.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you, your life gets turned around completely.
Yep.
And you don't die, you're
Yep.
still living. How do you go through something like that and make sure that you don't get desensitized to the miracle? So God did a miracle in your life, saved your life. Obviously, there's purpose behind it. Obviously, there's good that can come from that whole journey. Even you just sharing that is encouraging people that are listening today. Like, and there might be people that are on the same road that you were on, you know, or even people that are sick in their body or chronic illness or anything like that feel hopeless. But how do you get the miracle, but then don't get desensitized to it? How do you stay living with this like purpose and life change and not dipping back into casual living, if that makes sense?
Yeah, that totally makes sense. For me, it was, I never want to forget what God did for me in that experience. Yeah. And part of it is, it was a traumatic experience, and PTSD is a normal thing that people go through when trauma happens. And that's something I've had to battle. It's like, I want to be able to function healthily without the worry or anxiety about what happening to me again.
Yeah.
But I'd say even just writing about my story and sharing it and keeping it fresh in a way that's not glorifying the sin parts of it or even glorifying the pain of it, but just like, that happened to me. I don't want it to ever happen again. God very much intervened to correct the way I was living in a very supernatural way that I don't even want to go back. So that's kind of where I'm at now. I have no desire to drink. I have no desire to smoke again. And it was a humbling thing. And talking to my mom now, she goes kind of comedically, she's like, I prayed that you would just get so sick that you would quit drinking, but I didn't realize you'd get that sick,
Yeah, geez, like, Mom. You almost killed me.
Thanks.
Yeah.
But it was
awesome. They got to be stoked for you though.
Yeah.
Like this new life that you're living.
Yep. And what's really cool too, a nice plug for River Valley here, is when I was going through my healing process, it was a couple weeks after I just started getting better. Yeah. I just started to want to do something. And I was still kind of low functioning at the time.
Yep.
And I, still struggling to walk and even think straight. And I got an email from River Valley Woodbury, like, come help us clean up a park and pick up garbage. Yeah. So I'm like, I'm going to sign up for that. Yeah. So I showed up, and I'm sure I walked in like someone off the street, just looking haggard, 120-pound, 30-year-old kid that looked like he was dying. So Pastor Allen from that church, he partnered with me the entire day and just ministered to me all day long. And
no way.
He didn't know a lot of what I was going through at the time, or that, I knew a lot of the stuff he was sharing with me, but just how much that meant to me, that he just walked side by side with me, like, you're going to be okay. You're going to get better. And he told me his testimony. And
no way.
So that was I went home like, wow, what a great guy.
I had no idea about that.
Yeah. That he just,
I can't wait for him to listen to this story.
Yeah. Just put his arm around my shoulder. Like, it's going to be all right.
Wow.
And now here we are almost a year and a half later, or a year later, pretty much completely better. And, and the thing to catch up is a lot of the mental stuff, because there was a lot of, I think, damage that happened.
Yeah.
Psychologically, not mental disorders in a way, but just going through like neuronal cell death in your brain. When your body's dying, there's so many phases to that disease. And I think I was entering into some really dangerous territory there with the thresholds, where God's even been a year later. Every day I feel my mind being healed more and more. Yeah. And just more of a new identity coming back. Yeah. And I think that's what it was all about, was kind of killing this person and letting Jesus like save. I jotted it down the other day. I forget what I wrote, but it was something like, that whole process wasn't about me trying to save my life. Yeah. It was about me losing my life and letting Jesus save it. Yeah. And that's exactly what it was this formerly addicted, drunk, pretentious, ego-driven person that God just chiseled all that away to now it's just like identity is purely in him, and we come to Christ to die to ourselves. Yeah. And not to like find some image that we project out to the world. And so he kind of shattered a lot of my image that I had of myself. Yeah. And he's still constructing a new one, but I guess that's part of the faith process. Our entire life is, as we're being sanctified every day, we're becoming more like him. We're going to look more like him. We're not going to look like who we were yesterday. Yeah. So, amazing. Yeah. No, I agree with you. And I appreciate your spirit. There's something about you. There's like a gentleness and a humility and an encouragement, from who you are. And
even though we had gone to North Central together for a couple of those years, we didn't know each other well. So I didn't know who you were before, but who you are now is amazing, you know, and it's just awesome to hear. And I love what you said. It wasn't you saving yourself. And what's crazy is you made the right choices to save yourself, and then your body's literally shutting down.
And it still wasn't enough. It had to be a supernatural intervention.
It had to be a miracle situation, you know, and that's what God provided.
Yeah.
And now you live in it, which is awesome. Yep. So one thing that what were you going to say?
Well, I'll say, so now I can take that energy and go back to Leatherworks and everything I'm doing, just kind of with a new spirit of, I'm not doing this for me anymore. I'm not doing this to boost myself in some way, because Leatherworks is a well-known company.
Yep.
We have a lot of followers, and you can kind of get wrapped up easily in that image, and people come up to you on the street and greet you and just think it's so cool what you do. And I fed off that. Cool what you do. And I fed off that for years, where it really built up this kind of false identity.
Yeah.
And now to kind of just go into it, like, I work at this company with my family.
Yeah.
And I want us all to do well and just have fun and have to, like, a peaceful atmosphere and a place that people walk into and feel the Holy Spirit, which people have told us when they walk in our shop, like, it's different here.
Yeah.
Even people that aren't believers, because they see our boxer logo on the wall and, you know, what does fight the good fight mean? And,
you know,
we can kind of tell little bits of our story, and because we all have a story to tell. We've all been through things, but I just feel God changing even the way Leatherworks is being perceived outwardly too. And so it's cool.
Yeah. It's less of this striving to be whatever, like have your company be famous or you know, uber successful, although you do want that for a business to be successful and to have work to do, but it's more of that, praise God, you are working in a business that provides for your family, that keeps your family together, peaceful environment. I love that. It's awesome. It's just it seems like, and even just hanging with you, like there's like a restfulness, like not restlessness, but like restful, you know, like.
Yeah. Formerly being a very restless person.
Yeah.
God's been teaching me a lot to just live and function out of a place of rest.
Yeah.
And not out of a place of like attaining things or stuff or money or goals or relationships, those kinds of relationships, you know, but just allowing him to move in his own time and being okay with every moment that you're in and not being anxious.
Yeah. One thing I was going to ask you is we didn't really talk about it, but your faith journey, you know, growing up as a child, at what point was Jesus real to you and it became your own? How were you raised, and how did you get to the point even to acknowledge God in your life and even bring him on the journey of him, like freeing you up from some of the stuff, healing you, all that stuff? A lot of which is awesome. Who you are now is he's the Lord of your life. You're following him, listen to his voice, all that stuff. But how did you get there?
So growing up, I've always had kind of an awareness of who God was. And I can still remember, you know, when we had moved back from the Philippines, we were essentially homeless. We lived in Section 8 in Eden Prairie for a while. And I remember even just being there, like having an awareness of who God was, but I'd never been to church in my life. I was 4 years old at the time. And I have no idea how that works. I just remember feeling God's nearness. I remember laying in bed just like thinking about how long heaven is going to be and if that's going to feel too long, you know?
And you had never been to church?
I'd never been to church before.
Really?
And, you know, we were in kind of a rough situation then, and God rescued my mom out of a lot of crazy stuff.
Yeah.
And she kind of had an appearance of Jesus in a way, of like these fiery eyes. And that,
like a vision or a dream?
Like a literal like appearance of like these eyes that had appeared to her, just like love and conviction.
No.
And that called her, or that convicted her to get back to the church that she had grown up kind of going to when she was a little bit younger. So, you know, we came back. My mom was probably 20 at the time.
Yeah.
She had, I was born, or no, maybe 22. I was born when my mom was 18. She got married when she was 17.
Yep.
And so we came back to this church that my mom had gone to when she was 12. Like, you're the woman we've been praying for years to come back.
No.
Kind of that prodigal story.
No way.
And so I grew up in this great environment of, you know, my dad wasn't around. He was serving our country overseas. But we had a lot of great men in that church that just were fathers to me.
Yeah.
And a lot of families with a lot of kids at that church. It was like 7 kids per family back then. And so I just grew up with great people around.
Do you have siblings? Sorry.
Yeah, I have one full-blooded brother,
Yep.
a half-brother, and 4 step-siblings.
Yeah.
Both
awesome.
my parents are remarried.
Where are you in the line of all
I'm right
those?
in the middle.
Yeah.
Yep.
Me too. Well, actually, we have 4 kids, so I'm the middle oldest. But
So I remember when I was 9 years old, sitting in these church services and really feeling the presence of God. It was a lot of movements of the Holy Spirit back then that were really intense.
yeah.
And I remember sitting 9 years old, like, I need to accept Jesus, and I still remember that moment and where I was and just going up there and praying. And it's something that, as an adult, I battle through, like, are we saved simply when we say a prayer, or does there need to be life transformation that follows? Yeah. And for me, it was a genuine moment, but for years I was running away. And similar, my mom had run away for years, but she never felt like God wasn't there. And same for me. It was almost like God knows that your trajectory, that you believe in him. He has his hand over you. And even when I'm off running and doing my thing and
for sure
coming back, God's like, I was there the entire time. And now you're where I want you. But yeah, growing up at that church was great. Going to North Central, even though I was kind of on the bad kid list there, was great overall.
I feel like I was on the bad kid list too. So it's all good. Yeah.
And God had just become so much more real to me over the last year.
Yeah.
Less of a person we believe in and more of a person we follow.
Yeah.
And he's not vague. He's not distant. He's very present. And so when I went through all that deficiency stuff last year, it was just him there and kind of just holding my hand like, you're going to be okay. Yeah. And I even had friends that would say like a word over me, like, I feel like God wants me to share with you, you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
And I didn't believe him. All these affirmations of truth, and God changed my purpose. He changed my direction, and calling was reaffirmed. And so that was kind of my spiritual journey, always having faith, but really making it a reality, less a set of beliefs and more a lifestyle change.
Yeah. Man, that's awesome. I love what you said, being 4 years old and never been to church before, but having these like really, especially deep thoughts. I have a 3.5-year-old daughter. She'll be 4 in January.
Yeah.
And just, she's raised in church. She's feels like as a pastor's kid, you're always in church, but to think of her having these deep thoughts about eternity and heaven is pretty epic, and you had never been to church and having those thoughts, and makes you think of, and I don't know where, I think it's a proverb or something, maybe it's in Psalms, but that God has set eternity in the hearts of man, and we believe that every single person has been created by God, and that eternity is set in the hearts of every person created. And so it makes me think that that's how you can have those thoughts, like even at 4 years old, never being brought to church, that there's something beyond all of this, and there's people listening right now for sure that they don't believe in God, yet they have thoughts of like, what comes after all of this, what on earth am I here for? Like, what am I doing here? How did I get here? Those thoughts. And the reason they have the capacity to even think like that is because God said it in their hearts, from the very beginning, which is amazing. So I think even just you sharing that is a great inspiration for anybody listening to be able to open up their hearts and just think like, how do I even have the capacity to think those thoughts,
Yep.
And there's a speaker that I heard a while back that said, God actually put the capacity in people, not just to think about eternity, but the capacity within every single person to hear God, to hear from God, so deep thought. But
yeah, I think when people can really get it into their psyche that we are imagers of God.
What do you mean by that?
That he created us to be in his image.
Yep.
And when you can realize what that means about identity in this world, that's a lot of identity politics right now. It's like when you can know true identity, being made in God's image, and how healing that is to your own soul and to your relationships with everybody else. And I think knowing that can soften your heart to be more receptive to like, if I'm made in God's image, then he must have a purpose for me.
Yeah.
And that purpose is probably greater than what I'm doing right now. And anyway, that was, a lot of my journey last year. Just kind of realizing that.
Yeah, I can't believe that this just happened a year ago, in this journey.
Yeah, a little over a year ago.
Because again, and part of it's probably like your upbringing in faith, relationship with the Lord before all of this, that a lot of it's just redeemed, that you've been able to have such amazing growth just personally. What's some of the stuff that you're thinking about for your future as you process your calling in your life? Is it to expand this business and stay in it as long as you can till it becomes a worldwide, like the number one leather brand in the world, like dreaming like that? Or is it, a moment where you give it all up and you follow the Lord overseas, and do missions work?
Yeah, I think one thing
it also doesn't have to be either one of those choices.
Right. I think one thing God's kind of doing with me right now is really focusing me on getting out of debt.
Yeah.
And he's kind of positioning me in cool ways that are helping with that, which is awesome. I feel we've always had kind of a good idea of how to control the growth of our business.
Yep.
Where we of course want it to grow. You want your business to be successful, but we don't want it to grow so much we can't handle it anymore.
Yeah.
So we kind of have it in a really comfortable spot right now where we all do well, but it's not unmanageable. And I would like it to kind of maintain that and maybe grow a little bit to the point where, my dad just retired, Kent just retired.
Yep.
And he's still there helping. And my mom's probably got 15, 20 more years of work as well. And so you can kind of see the transition happening where I could see myself running it or managing it someday, but having that freedom to go when I want to go.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people that they're not necessarily long-term missionaries, but they go to the same place multiple times a year. They're kind of doing this repetitive building relationships and community and getting involved with the church there.
Yeah.
And I love that. And that's kind of what I want to do.
Yeah. The idea would be to help run the company and then
have
3 or 4
financial
months a year.
freedom to be able to just dip out for a month or a week at a time if I want to,
Yeah, totally.
So I think I'm going to start that next year.
Yeah.
It's just kind of maybe go to wherever I'm feeling called. I think Istanbul, maybe go a week at a time here and there. And as that keeps going and as things get clarified, and I think God's revealing a lot right now anyway, but maybe that will become full-time, and Turkey's in a different political climate right now where that's not realistic for a lot of people.
Right.
So I could see, and I'm a photographer, so I kind of have an in with that as well.
Yeah.
And it's just, we'll see what happens on that front.
Travel the world, do photography.
Yep.
No, that's awesome. One of the things that we always ask at the end of each podcast or interview is what's one piece of advice you give to somebody following your footsteps? And I'd like to rephrase it a little bit because I think what you're about to answer is that same advice. But I think people right now that are listening, this audience, it's a wide range of people in all different walks of life. But no doubt, are there people that there's something in their life that they know needs to change, and it's not even because somebody's shaming them about it or because some pastor is saying, stop sinning, otherwise you're going to hell type thing. Like, I don't think it's that. I think they just know. They know, like, I don't know, it could even be a non-Christian listening, but they know they need to change this thing in their life. And I don't think people put it on the level of like, otherwise it's going to kill me. And it may not, but it may as well. It may ruin their life if they let it keep going. What type of advice or encouragement do you give to that person that is like on the brink of saying, I know that I need to change this. I just have never had the guts to recognize it, identify it, and actually try to make a change.
Yeah, something I realized that I think would be helpful to share is that honesty is the door to change. You cannot change without first being honest, either with God or with other people. And I knew that the Lord knew my struggles. It took calling my parents and saying, I'm an alcoholic and I need help.
Wow.
And that's what started the change.
Yeah.
That opened the door to me being able to share other things I'd been keeping hidden for years, which led to even more healing. So if there's someone out there who's listening that's like, I need to change, but I can't get rid of this thing, don't push away the Lord's like urging you to do that.
Yeah.
Because he urged me for 2 years to do that.
Yeah.
And I avoided it and quenched it for a long time. And that fire would come back and I'd pour water on it. And I'd say just don't be afraid of honesty and not even being afraid of judgment or getting in trouble.
Yeah.
Because it's like, if you want to change something, there's going to be critics. And of course, going through an addiction, I knew that there was a lot of people judging from the outside, especially when I was kind of getting sick and losing weight. And it's like, this kid is like skeletal and he looks horrible.
Yeah.
And I could tell there was a lot of judgment going on, but still, like, don't be afraid of that, and don't be afraid to be honest.
Yeah.
And that opens the door to change, and God honors that as well.
It sounds like you had great parents that were with you on the journey and encouraging you at that moment of just bringing it up. They're like, yeah, you are an alcoholic. Let's do this thing. We're ready to
And what's
go.
so cool about my parents, especially my mom, is she's a very militant person where she's like, I'm not going to let you just lay there and whimper around all day. You're going to get up, you're going to walk, you're going to go to work.
Do it. Yeah.
And that's exactly what I needed.
Yeah.
I didn't need someone to just be like, oh, you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
It's like, no, get up. We're doing this.
Yeah.
And even though I was terrified, and sometimes I thought, I'm going to die if I get up and try to go to work today. You know, I didn't have any energy. Yeah. God would just carry me through that.
Wow.
And it's funny. My mom and I had coffee with Bethany Schrock a couple days ago.
Yes.
And we were just talking about that too. It's just like being militant and like not accepting circumstances.
Yes.
And pushing through and knowing that God's with you. And
she was our first guest on this podcast, which is crazy.
What's cool
and she's
about
walking
her
through her
is
own journey. Yeah.
She became a friend when she was going through her tumor, is when I was going through my stuff. Yeah. So she just became a buddy. Like, she'd just send encouragement and like, you got this. Here's a good encouragement video or something. And
no way.
And her husband Wes are just amazing people. Yes. And I'm excited to get to know them more.
St. Paul people too.
Yep.
So they love St. Paul.
Yeah. They live like 2 blocks away from our shop.
Yeah.
So
amazing.
Yeah.
To the point of you having great parents and support. Sometimes the fear to be honest with yourself or with other people is just the fear of being shamed, or even just the consequences of what they're going through, basically the fear of pain, to walk through. Like, there's pain to walk through as I bring this into the light, and I think about it multiple different ways. It's like, a bone that's broken and it sets the wrong way, like there's things that happen in our life that break us down, and we try to manage it's like breaking your arm and it gets set the wrong way. And then the only way to fix this thing is you have to walk through the pain of re-breaking it and getting it set right, and
that's a great
I guess I don't know what the question is, but how do we help people? And even because this is not the last time you're going to walk through something, or I'm going to walk through something, like, how do we ensure that if there's something that needs to be changed in our life, that we don't shy away from it just because we fear the re-breaking and the resetting and the healing, you know? Again, people listening, they're like, well, I don't have parents like you do. And I know I'm going to get shamed for it. And I know there's going to be immense pain that I got to walk through. How do we encourage people? And even myself, I think about myself, like, how do we just step into it? Like, it's gotta happen. It's gotta happen.
I would say that even the hardships in life, one of the misconceptions about being a believer is that everything's going to be great for the rest of my life. Yeah. No problems. And I don't think that's true. I think what people forget is that even hardships are still grace. Yeah. And I think that's what I had to realize too. Like, something bad could happen further down the line, and none of us know. But to walk fearlessly into the future knowing that God's with us, and that even if we're going through correction or discipline, that is still God's grace, because he disciplines those he loves. And I think there's a scripture, and I don't know exactly where it is, but maybe it's like he wounds us to heal us. The idea that even God's wounding, not as you would think of it, but even that is his love and his healing.
For sure. The Bible talks about correction like that. Yep. That a good father is corrective, and sets boundaries. And, so I agree with that. Like, walk through it, take the correction, get the bones reset so that you can live, and it's awesome. Dude, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, sharing your journey. Yeah. It's epic, I love meeting, tradesmen, craftsmen. You're in a niche of making leather goods, but that's not who you are. You are this amazing, encouraging, humble man that's been brought through so much. I'm glad you're alive. I'm glad you're on this podcast.
Me too.
It's going to help a bunch of people. Last question before we leave. What's your favorite book of all time?
That Tyssul tipped me off to that one ahead of time. That is a hard question. Tyssul. It's a two-way tie.
Yeah. All right.
Can I do that?
Go for it. Yeah, please.
It's a two-way tie between Peace Like a River by Leif Enger.
Yep.
Fiction, but favorite book I've ever read. And A Severe Mercy, which is a biography about Sheldon Vanauken and his wife meeting each other, falling in love, befriending C.S. Lewis, and how they became Christians through their friendship. And
so that's a true story biography.
Yeah. Yep.
Buddies with C.S. Lewis.
Yep. A Severe Mercy. It's one of the most beautiful. If you like a love story, it's a pretty sappy love story in a good way. Yeah. It'll get you crying. And then A Peace Like a River is just, I really identified with the book because I grew up having asthma, and the main character is a kid who has asthma. And it kind of reads like a Western. Leif Enger's a believer. It's not necessarily a Christian book, but there's a lot of theological undertones to it. Yeah. His son shoots and kills these intruders and flees the law, and the dad, who's kind of like the father, brings his family, packs him up to go out west to find the son and to welcome him back. And
no way.
It's just a beautiful story, so I'd recommend anything by Leif Enger.
Peace Like a River.
Peace Like a River.
A Severe Mercy.
A Severe Mercy.
Check it out. It's amazing. How can people find you online?
My Instagram is just Nathan O'Malley.
Yep.
And Leatherworks is Leatherworks MN.
Yep.
And that's about it.
Amazing. Yeah. Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah,
great job. Killed it.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you've enjoyed this, we'd love for you to subscribe to this channel. We've got new episodes releasing every single week. We'd also love to hear your questions or comments. You can comment below. You can also find us on Instagram at Exception Podcast. And I want to give a quick shout out to our producer, Tyssul. My name's Kirk Graham, and we'll see you back next week.